Hello guys and gals, and this is part 11 of our reading through Strange Monsters and Great Searches by George Laycock. As always, we will be going over the copyright information. Copyright 1973 by George Laycock, all rights reserved, published in large print by arrangement with Doubleday and Company Incorporated, set in Photon 18-point Helvetica medium, and we will be reading Mysterious Tracks. Number 11, Mysterious Tracks. In the last one, we learned about an African pheasant that was, huge. Anyways, Mysterious Tracks. Tallest of the world's mountains are the Himalayas. They extend for 1,500 miles across southern Asia. In some places, the range is 200 miles wide. Within this sprawling, desolate region lie wilderness valleys and towering peaks seldom visited by men. There are also some fertile valleys choked with dense jungle and dotted with little farm clearings. But further up, the climate grows cold until finally the world is filled with snow-capped peaks, sharp ridges, and precipitous cliffs. In this high country of the Himalayas, beyond 13,000 foot elevations, the elements are harsh and the wind blows bitter cold, stirring white laceworks of snow around the boulders. One might think that in this inhospitable world, no large creatures could exist at all. But what about those giant footprints? On numerous occasions, mountaineers have discovered them. Something seems to go walking up there. Let's check and make sure that I'm not missing a page. Okay. Colonel L.A. Waddell was exploring the slopes of Mount Everest, the world's highest peak, in 1887. When he came down, he reported unidentified footprints. 3 years later, another climber reported having seen the prints again. This time they were at an elevation of 18,500 feet. The tracks led uphill and vanished among the boulders. Russian soldiers reported shooting and killing such a creature in their mountain country in 1925. Again in 1942, Sławomir Rawicz, a Polish soldier escaped from a Russian concentration camp, was making his way back out over the Himalayas. As he crossed over from Tibet, he encountered, at a distance of only 100 yards, two man-like creatures. He estimated them to be 8 feet high and said they had massive arms, square heads, and were covered with thick coats of brown fur. To Tibetan tribesmen, these reports are not unexpected at all. They seem to know these are the creatures that have long lived there. They have various local names. Usually they are called Yeti. More commonly, the rest of us call them abominable snowmen. What could they be? Maybe giant bears? Some insisted. They even said they belonged to the species Ursus arctos isabellinus. But the abominable snowman also, as proved by its footprints, walk on 2 feet. Bears can walk on 2 feet, but do not do so for more than a few steps. They are definitely not known to go leaping about the snowfield on their hind feet. Others claim that the mysterious tracks in the snow were left by a langur monkey. But these creatures are too small, and besides, they too walk on all 4 feet. Meanwhile, doubters speculate that high altitude does strange things to people, and maybe some frightened by the lonely place let their imaginations run wild. The trouble with this has been that over the years, evidence continues to pile up, indicating that the snowman, or something, is up there, just as the local tribesmen have always insisted. One report tells of an Everest expedition in 1923. Far above them, the climbers sighted figures in the snowfields. The creatures were moving. When climbers sighted figures in the snowfields, the creatures were moving. Oh, wait. Let me read this one. This one is kind of confusedly written. One report tells of an Everest expedition of 1923. Far above them, the climbers sighted figures in the snowfields. The creatures were moving. When climbers sighted figures in the snowfields, the creatures were moving. When snow. That doesn't make much sense. I think that's probably a typo. When Italian explorer A.N. Tambazzi climbed up to the glacier area in 1925, one thing he definitely did not expect to encounter was the abominable snowman. At first, Tambazzi had a tendency to make light of the whole story. When the subject came up in conversation, he would flash his charming smile on those assembled and refer to the legendary snowman as that delicious fancy. But that was before Mr. Tambazzi went up the mountain. Somewhat later, back in Bombay, India, his story was quite different. He had seen his first abominable snowman. One of his excited porters drew his attention to it. Unquestionably, Tambazzi wrote later, the figure in outline was exactly upright and stopping occasionally to uproot some dwarf rhododendrons. It showed dark against the snow and wore no clothes. Later he found the footprints and described them in detail. Among others who has seen tracks was explorer and surveyor Eric Shipton. He found tracks at 16,000 feet in 1936. Later, in 1951, he found other tracks and photographed them. These pictures have helped convince many that there is substance to the story of the abominable snowman. The photograph showed a foot with 4 toes. Obviously, it was not the foot of a bear. Neither was it anything else science could identify. These animals, whatever they were, said the New York Times, did exist. At 19,000 feet, Sir John Hunt again found snowman prints in 1937. Another story tells of 2 Norwegians who happened on 2 sets of tracks in that same area 11 years later. The Norwegians followed the tracks hoping for a look at the strange creature about which they had heard and read. Soon they came upon the Yeti responsible for the tracks. If you come back down the mountain, If you come back down the mountain and report having seen the Yeti, some may believe, but if you bring along the abominable snowman, no one can doubt your word. But what the Norwegians are said to have done next was not exactly the approved way of capturing an abominable snowman. They tried to lasso it. This effort failed, and we are spared details of why or how. The Norwegians came back down the mountain and reported that the abominable snowman looked a lot like a large ape. This description, however, is a generalization. What would the abominable snowman look like if you should encounter one? Naturally, there are variations in the reports by eyewitnesses. No 2 people surprised by a monster high in the Himalayas are likely to see quite the same thing. But the following composite portrait is assembled from various sources. Understandably, considerable attention has been paid to the feet. They have been reports of tracks up to 18 inches long. But people of sound judgment now believe the feet of the abominable snowman to be somewhat smaller. Most agree that they are at least 12 to 14 inches long and quite broad in proportion to their length. Those photographed by Eric Shipton were 12 inches long. They are so wide that in some tracks, where the sun had melted the edges of the tracks, they appear almost round or square. However, smaller tracks have been found too, and these lead some people to speculate that there are actually 2 kinds of Yeti, a small species and a large one. The smaller species has been reported from time to time at lower elevations in the dense jungles of the river valleys. Along these rivers, when there is no snow, they leave their marks in the sand. In the highlands, however, the snowmen may appear suddenly anywhere between 13,000 and 20,000 feet. They seldom come down to the villages, just as people seldom go up to the elevations where the Yeti live. The snowmen are covered with long brownish hair, which falls down over their eyes. Their heads are said to be pointed on top, and their eyes are deep sunken and reddish. Their light-colored faces are without hair, we are told, and not at all pretty, except perhaps to another Yeti. They do not have a tail. The feet, like most of the body, are covered with hair. When the Everest expedition was far up the mountain in 1921, their Tibetan porters told them about the food habits of the Yeti. These strange creatures, according to local legend, eat yaks and people. There seems little evidence to support this statement. Strangely, some Tibetan people also believe that the abominable snowman has its feet on backwards. The reason for this has never been fully explored. Maybe an abominable snowman can get turned around like anybody else. Chances are excellent that the farther one lives from the land of the abominable snowman, the easier it is to make fun of stories about these legendary creatures. Travelers have long noticed that groups of people living in Tibet and Nepal suddenly become quiet and deeply troubled when the subject is brought up. One expedition of Russian scientists has set off to find Scientists that set off to find the Yeti decided that the creatures do in fact exist. Many tribesmen, said the official report, have met the creature. They speak of it as an animal moving on two legs with brown, shiny fur and long hair on its head. Its face looks both ape and man. Looks like both ape and man. Hunters often find remnants of its food, for example, bits of rabbit, but according to them, the wild man also eats plant roots. Meanwhile, all who study the evidence must eventually consider the strange, unidentified scalp owned by the monks in a monastery far up in the Himalayas near the border between Nepal and Tibet. Excuse me. If a visitor comes and they like him, the monk may bring out and display the patch of hair they have had in their possession for perhaps 300 years. Ask the monks what it is, and you get a brief answer. It is the scalp of a Yeti. How they obtained it from the Yeti is not recorded. It is shaped like a scalp or hat. Unlike a hat, it has no seam and has never been sewed. One visitor years ago managed to remove a few of the brown hairs from the scalp. They were sent to New Jersey to be studied by a professor who is an authority on hair, but the scientist could not identify it. He knew of no other with which it would match. What should you do if you meet an abominable snowman? The creature is, after all, experienced in getting around the rugged, snowbound country and can leap over boulders with the agility of a gazelle. The best defense, according to one regional story, is to quickly gather up as many rocks and sticks as you can and toss these treasures to the creature, one at a time. With considerable skill, the Yeti will reach out and catch the objects. Soon both arms will be filled. Soon both arms are filled. At that point, he seems not to know quite what to do. He is good at catching, but reluctant to drop any of the newly acquired prizes, so he just stands there burdened down with rocks and stones, while you run away down the mountainside. Perhaps with greater exposure to the abominable snowman, people will someday work out a better defense. There is, of course, much evidence that the abominable snowman want only to stay away from people. They vanish into the brush or behind rocks. They prefer to stay at elevations far above people and usually at least 2 miles above sea level. Explorers, besides Norwegians with lassos, have long dreamed of capturing a Yeti, but what in the world would one do with it? Although these may be primitive man-like creatures, as some seriously believe, we have every reason to suspect that they want no part of our cherished civilization. As we look about us, this is sometimes understandable. One can hardly imagine an abominable snowman in a traffic jam. He belongs in the vast windswept mountain slopes. There in the rugged snowfields, he goes right on leaving his strange tracks. Those who find them come down the mountain with a new sense of wonder. Perhaps up there in the high Himalayas, the mountain climber is not really as much alone as he might have thought. Up next time will be Chapter 12, Sasquatch alias Bigfoot. Let me put a bookmark in here. Okay. We have been reading Strange Monsters and Great Searches by George Laycock. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.